The snow stretched endlessly, a white wilderness swallowing the horizon, where silence pressed down heavy except for the cries of her newborn. Babies scattered on the frozen ground, their tiny fists flailed against the biting air. Their lips quivered, and their fragile lungs pushed out wails that carried across the valley, piercing through the storm as though begging for salvation. Tied to a rough wooden fence, a woman sat slumped against the biting cold of the timber, her wrists bound with ropes that had eaten into her skin until they bled. Her dress was torn, her hair tangled, her breath shallow, each inhale a battle against the frost that stung her chest. She had no strength to gather the children against her body, no strength to warm them with what little life remained inside her. She felt as though she were dissolving into the storm, fading with each minute, until a figure appeared in the distance, boots striking fast against the frozen ground, a brown coat billowing behind him. The man ran, urgency written in every line of his body, alarm etched across his rugged face as he fought through the storm to reach the scene of desolation that no man should have stumbled upon in such wilderness. His heart pounded, not just from exertion but from the shock of what lay before him. A woman broken, babies abandoned to the snow, ropes a cruel testimony to human cruelty that had placed them here. His breath came out in harsh clouds as he skidded to the ground beside her, the snow crunching beneath his knees. "God above," he whispered, though the words were lost to the wind. Her head lifted weakly, eyes dulled with exhaustion, yet flickering with the faintest spark of recognition at the sight of another living soul. She tried to speak, but only a rasp escaped, a sound that carried both plea and despair. The man's hands, calloused from years of ranch work, moved with a surprising gentleness as he reached for the ropes cutting into her wrists. He tugged at the knots, cursing under his breath at the cruelty of whoever had bound her there. Finally, the ropes loosened and fell away, revealing wrists swollen and blooded from the struggle. She gasped, arms collapsing uselessly into her lap. But the man did not waste a second. He scooped the nearest wailing child into his coat, pressing the tiny body against his chest for warmth. One by one he gathered the babies, cradling them in his arms and tucking them inside his thick coat, until the cries dulled slightly under the fragile protection of his body heat. "Hold on," he urged the woman, his voice steady though his heart was breaking at the sight of her. He slipped an arm around her frail shoulders, lifting her from the snow. She stumbled, her legs refusing to obey, but he held her upright, pressing her close to shield her from the wind. Her eyes fluttered shut, and he shook her gently. "Don't you dare give up now, not with these little ones needing you." His words seemed to stir something in her, and she clung weakly to his coat, letting him guide her step by step across the snow. His cabin wasn't far, though in weather like this every step felt like miles. Still, he pushed forward, driven by a will he hadn't known he still possessed, carrying not only her weight, but the desperate responsibility of her newborn lives. The storm clawed at them, winds howling like wolves circling prey. But he pressed on, his boots sinking deep into drifts, his breath ragged. At last, the outline of a small wooden cabin broke through the white haze, smoke faintly curling from its chimney. Relief surged through him, but he didn't slow. Urgency sharpened every motion as he shoved open the door with his shoulder, carrying the woman and children into the dim, warm glow of the room. The scent of burning wood filled the air, and the crackling fire promised life against the icy fingers of the storm outside. Gently, he laid her down on a bed covered with woolen blankets, then quickly stripped off his coat, revealing the bundle of babies he had tucked inside. He placed them near the fire, wrapping each one in cloth he tore from his spare shirts, anything to keep the cold from stealing them away. The woman's eyes darted weakly toward her children, lips trembling as though to ask if they were safe. "They're here," he assured her softly, kneeling beside her. "They'll be warm now. You're safe, too." Her gaze softened, tears spilling silently down her cheeks as exhaustion overtook her once more, pulling her into unconsciousness. He stayed at her side, listening to the fragile breaths of the babies, their cries fading to whimpers under the comfort of warmth. His chest ached at the sight. Who had done this to her? Who had tied a woman to a fence in a storm, left for newborns to die in the snow? Rage simmered inside him, but stronger still was a determination to keep them alive. Hours passed as he tended to them, feeding the babies drops of warmed milk he prepared, rubbing their tiny hands and feet to keep the blood moving, wrapping them tighter in cloth until their skin began to regain a healthier color. For the woman, he brewed broth, pressing the cup gently to her lips when she stirred, coaxing her to sip. Each time her eyes opened, she seemed startled to see him, a stranger, yet relief followed as she realized her children were safe by the fire. Slowly, strength crept back into her, and with it came the haunted look of someone who had endured horrors unspeakable. It wasn't until the third day, when the storm had eased and the world outside lay in fragile silence, that she finally spoke more than a whisper. Her voice trembled, raw and uncertain, as she told him pieces of her story. A village not far from the valley had turned against her when the children were born. She had been beaten for reasons that barely made sense: old grudges, cruel traditions, jealousy among those who called themselves her neighbors. Left for dead with her newborns, she had been bound and abandoned in the storm. Her words faltered, but the pain in her eyes told the rest. The rancher listened, his jaw tight, his hands clenched at his sides, but he offered no judgment, no questions that might deepen her wounds. Instead, he said only, "You're safe here now, and as long as I breathe, those little ones will never be left in the snow again." The promise came easily, surprising him with its weight, but it felt right, as though fate had placed them all in his path for a reason he hadn't yet understood. As the days turned into weeks, the cabin filled with life in a way it never had before. The woman's strength returned slowly. Though the scars of her suffering lingered, she remained quiet, often staring into the fire as though afraid it might go out and leave her in darkness once more. Yet when she held her children, her face softened, a flicker of hope glowing where despair once lived. The rancher, once a man resigned to loneliness in the vast wilderness, found himself rising early, not just for the cattle, but for the cries of tiny mouths needing milk. He learned how to soothe them, how to rock them to sleep in his calloused hands, how to smile again at the sight of their innocence. The bond between him and the woman grew not through words but through the quiet acts of survival. They shared, gathering firewood together, tending to the babies, cooking simple meals by the fire, watching the storm-swept landscape from the window. Slowly, her trust in him grew, and with it, a fragile warmth spread between them. Fragile yet undeniable, but the past could not be erased so easily. One morning, as the sun broke over the horizon, figures appeared on the ridge beyond the valley, men from the village, searching, their voices carried faintly on the wind. The woman froze at the sight, terror flashing across her face, and clutched her children close. The rancher placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and firm. "You're not going back," he said quietly. "Not while I'm here." She looked up at him, searching his face, and for the first time, her fear gave way to something stronger: belief. The men never reached the cabin, the storm of the wilderness, the strength of the rancher's resolve, and the bond forged through suffering became a shield stronger than any rope that had once bound her. In that small cabin, surrounded by snow and silence, a new chapter began, not just of survival, but of a family born not by choice but by fate, drawn together by cruelty and saved by compassion. And as the rancher watched the woman rock her children by the fire, their cries soft and content, he felt the weight of his own loneliness lift at last. The wilderness outside remained harsh, unforgiving, but within those four walls there was warmth, there was life, and there was a fragile, unspoken promise that none of them would ever face the storm alone again.